Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today is hosted by Carolina's IT and our office, Vann Attorneys. And we're going to be talking today about bringing your own device to work. That's a topic that is growing in interest and certainly one that we know many of you are dealing with. And today we're going to be leading that discussion. I'm very thankful to be able to share the webinar today with Mark Cavaliero. He is the president of Carolina's IT. I've known Mark for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, 5 years now, and have such respect for him and for his organization. They do an awesome job in helping companies and businesses with their IT needs, and he is just a real joy to work with. My name is James Vann, and I'm an attorney with Vann Attorneys. Actually, our offices are with less than 100 yards, I guess, apart, or maybe just about 100 yards apart. We actually do work with each other, so it's a pleasure to do that. So, Mark, thank you for prepping for the day, and it doesn't take Mark long to do this because this is just sort of his nature. He knows how to do that stuff. So, with that, Mark, what are some of the topics we're going to be talking about?
Well, thanks, James. I'm very excited to be hosting this webinar as well. This is a topic that it's very important to us and to many of our clients and folks that we're talking with during the business week. Basically, some topics for discussion today, some things that I'd like to cover. What is BYOD? Why is it important? What does it mean to businesses? What are some of the benefits they can get from it? Some of the concerns, maybe some of the trade-offs. I'd also like to examine some what-if scenarios. These are the kind of things that, when I'm talking with businesses, it's helpful to think about. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? The important thing is that you're prepared and that you've thought through actions and reactions before you have a situation. Then obviously, I know some legal concerns, and that's where we'll certainly lean heavily on your experience and your knowledge as far as what businesses should really be aware of from a legal perspective. We've got some guidance, some things that we think companies could benefit from, policies they could implement, ideas that might help them as they go forward, and then certainly probably the most important section is questions. We know there are a lot of questions that are out there, and we'd just like to open up some time for folks to ask questions and maybe make some comments about things that may be on their mind.
Mark, let me just mention this also just as people get started. If you want to submit questions, you can, again, do that 2 ways. You may use the control panel, go to webinar control panel and submit them that way, and or you could use just by email at webinar@vannattorneys.com. And I had one friend, as we were putting this information out, they said, BYOD, is that bring your own drink? So if you have signed in today with that mindset, hang in there. You're going to learn something, but it's not bring your own drink. So, Mark, tell us, what is BYOD?
Okay, BYOD is something we're hearing more and more about. Basically, it stands for bring your own device. In simple terms, it's just the practice of allowing employees of an organization to bring their own computers, smartphones, or whatever device that they may have and use that for work purposes. Essentially, it's an extension of what's known as distributed computing model in the industry. It's pushing power out to the end users where they can bring in their personal device that belongs to them and they can use it for work-related functions. It sounds simple, but there's some very big implications on both the technical, legal, and management side that businesses need to be aware of. The idea is, remember that in a network, any device has the potential to impact any other device on the network. So you really have to structure the network so that you can minimize the damage that can be caused and so that you can make it more efficient to manage. The overarching idea when you're thinking about a BYOD policy or implementing this is, as a business, you want to get the most benefit with the least amount of problems and trade-offs. And so that's what I think of when we actually look at BYOD. I believe with the next slide we've got some statistics with usage.
Yeah, we just did a little research in prepping for this webinar. SurveyMonkey did one, and one of the reports was that 54% of the people that responded who own a tablet use it for business purposes. And we all have seen the increase of tablets and that kind of device in the workplace. Interesting enough, 14% of those reported that the employer provided one for the employee. And that's certainly, I'm sure, Mark, you've seen that. That will be an increasing number probably in the near future. Another interesting survey was that the staff use their own smartphones or tablets at work without the approval of the company, and that was 56.8. And if you look at the number, that's probably low. Because I don't know how they got that number, but if they ask them if you use it, I'm sure there were some that didn't report it without having company approval. The sign being, people are doing it.
They're doing it. They're doing it, whether or not you're managing it or not, whether or not you're approving it or not, they're doing it.
And that's right. I mean, it's amazing to me as I go around to different companies and I look at their workforce. It's amazing how many people you see with smartphones or tablets at their desktop. It used to be maybe in their pocketbook or in their jacket or their pocket, but now it's laying out on their desk or their workspace. And another stat was that 7% of the staff own a smartphone and they use them at work. Again, just another sign that that's going to continue to increase. So,
yeah, it's definitely happening. And as a business owner or as a manager in a business or even as the IT manager, you've got some choices to make. You can ignore it, you can embrace it, you can manage it, or you can say, hey, we're not going to have this. And so what I'd like to do is go through just a few of the potential benefits. I mean, there are some good reasons why you might want to embrace this, and then also look at some of the trade-offs as well. But as far as benefits, I mean, obviously the first one that comes to mind, the quickest one, is improves cash flow. I mean, it helps. You have new employees that show up, and right off the bat, you don't have to buy them a laptop or a cell phone. So that can certainly, in the short term, result in an increase, in cash flow, or at least a reduction of cash outflow, because you don't have to go out and purchase this device. With that comes a little bit of a trade-off, though, because, it's not a corporate asset, and if you're typically used to being able to take a depreciation on an asset that you purchased, well, you can't take a depreciation on it because, you don't own it. Some other potential benefits, though, you're really less vulnerable to technology life cycle. So, as we've seen, and the life cycle of technology just continues to speed up, there's always the next big thing. And when the next big thing comes, everybody wants it. So one of the nice things about BYOD is, when it comes, they can get it on their own process, on their own time schedule. You're not faced with, oh, wow, this new operating system is out, and, I need 50 of my sales reps need new laptops, and so, I've got to go out and spend $100,000 on new machines. So that definitely helps. Many businesses, the way they structure BYOD is as a reimbursable expense. So, during the month, you reimburse this person for a portion of the total cost of the device every month. So it's similar to a cell phone reimbursement. So depending on how you structure that, it, may be a cost savings, might not be a complete cost savings. But again, it's structuring it is what's important. Remember also that if cash flow was your only concern, really what you might do is just lease. By leasing, you can get the benefits of improving that monthly cash flow without that capital outlay right up front. So certainly cash flow is something to look at. Some other potential savings, as far as cost, really depends on the reimbursement structure. If you have a very high reimbursement, you might not be saving as much, but if you have a lower reimbursement, you may really get some of those benefits. What we've seen is that the more browser-based your organization is, the better a BYOD policy works, because with a browser, it's easy to access applications, and if you've got a whole bunch of custom applications or applications that need to run locally, it's just more difficult to set them up, and your ideas as far as what it's going to be compatible with are a little more difficult. So what we encourage folks is look at the total cost. The costs don't always completely disappear. They usually just pop up somewhere else. One other thing you avoid is I know we've all got one. You probably got one as a closet where the old laptops are. We've seen that so many businesses we go into, and okay, here's your closet where your old technology is. Well, if you've got a good BYOD policy, you really avoid that. Some other things, increasing freedom might result in some productivity gains, facilitates higher operational tempo. Really, that works best if you've got trained employees. A lot of this, the younger generation, they're coming up, they've had smartphones all their life, and they don't really need a lot of training to get them going. But if you have, an older workforce or folks that are not as skilled, you may have to spend some more time on training. People get to use the technology they're comfortable with. I mean, try try taking a Mac user and make them use a Windows machine. You know?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't go over real good. And most people have the technology they like. So you reduce this this hand-me-down. The idea of oh, I'm getting the laptop that the company assigned me. Some things on the concern slide. The main thing is that your costs don't always decrease. They just shift. Sometimes you have with the BYOD policy increased support costs. Your support costs actually go up because you're getting, you're having more tools that you've got to buy, more support costs. Your techs are using more time to support your user base. The more variety you allow, I mean, some folks really don't set a limit on what type of devices can be used, and others say, well, you're either going to have Android or iPhones. So the more variety you allow, the more costs you're going to have. And those costs, might come in terms of time or in terms of tools that it's going to take.
Mark, we had a question that just came in, and it sort of goes back to you were just talking about the cost. Do we have any data on employee reimbursements for BYOD and suggestions? And again, look, what kind of data do we have? We want to make suggestions back for the BYOD.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great question. Yeah, typically what we do is we look at the cost of the device. What should a normal device cost? And we set a standard for, okay, these are the specs that you really need, and for a device that meets those specs, we know, well, that thing ought to cost about X dollars, and based on that, we add a little bit in for management, and then we divide the cost by 24 months, and basically that's how we do it, and that's how we set the reimbursement. Basically, we're reimbursing them for what it would cost to lease the device over the cost of, over the time frame of 24 months.
Yeah,
that's typically how we do it.
When you say you add in the cost of management, what does that include?
Yeah, if you got some management tools that maybe the user some things that the user has to purchase.
Okay.
Certainly on the management side, if you're going to be reimbursing them and they
not
have to buy a tool.
Not your management side of managing. Okay. Got it.
No, that's the management cost on our side is something that we have to allocate as we make decisions on, is this policy an appropriate policy? Okay. Great question, though. Very good question. Okay, so again, increased cost of support and management tools. Really, when you look at the management of this, your network has got to be resilient. The last thing you want is to introduce a new device, and oh boy, somebody brought this device in from home, they plugged it into the network, and all of a sudden the network has come to a crawl.
Yeah.
Or a device is crashing. So you want to have, some segmentation set up on the network through VLANs or, routing or whatever you put in place. Typically, this means higher quality networking equipment that probably is going to be a little more expensive than just your consumer grade equipment. Another risk is you may introduce security risk and performance risk for that matter. If you allow use at home, so if they have if they've got a device that they use both for home and for business, you potentially can introduce risk that maybe they get through their browsing habits at home, whatever they may be. And then, they go home, they're browsing, they're doing something, and they bring the machine in on the network, plug it in, and basically whatever threat that they've got on their machine, if it's not properly contained, can spread to your network. That is definitely something we have seen in the past. And then you ask questions, are you going to allow video streaming, audio streaming? There's definitely an impact on bandwidth as well. It sounds like we may have had another question.
Yeah, the other question is, how about the cost of the data plan? I think obviously with phones or tablets, what percentage should the company target to pay?
The cost of whatever the employee is paying for the data plan.
Yeah, say for example, an employee comes in and their data plan that they have on their device is super huge.
Right.
How much of that do you look for?
We typically set an amount that's a standard amount. Basically, we look at, well, what would it cost on an average data plan? And a lot of times it depends on, is the employee a sales rep? Do they need to be? Are they traveling? Do they need a plan that includes tethering? If so, you might have a higher tier. But typically, we'll see reimbursements, 70 to 80%, thinking that, well, the employee is going to use it for some home use and some personal use. But again, I think that really depends on what the employee's job-related things are. You're going to reimburse a traveling rep or somebody that really needs to use that cell phone more than an office, maybe an office assistant that really doesn't have that much need for it.
I don't have the The answer, Mark, I don't know if you do. I know the IRS recently put out in the last 8 months or so some guidelines on reimbursements for cell phones and data plans, and the IRS actually was looking at starting to tax some of those benefits to employees if it's provided by, say, for example, just here's your cell phone, you can use it for personal and/or company benefit. That the IRS was looking to tax part of that to the employee. And again, I don't have the answer because I haven't followed up with what the IRS, how they're handling that now. But the other issue was reimbursement. Is they were going to look at, and again, I don't know how in the world the IRS would make that that data easily accessible, to find out what percentage they were paying and what percentage they were using on their data plans. But it's just something to think about.
Absolutely.
As you're putting these plans together.
They definitely can be a taxable benefit, and we run into that.
Yeah.
So I guess my advice to folks out there would be, well, consult with your accountant and make sure that you're compliant. Okay, so obviously some compliance, some licensing, some liability issues that it might introduce. We're going to talk a little bit more about those. I know, James, you've got some, as far as liability, you've got some thoughts on that. Potential decrease in operational efficiency if you don't properly manage your BYOD policy. Maybe you have a help desk, or maybe your help desk consists of one person that coordinates it. Regardless of what you have, it can quickly get overwhelmed if you've got end users that are bringing their personal problems into the business, and then somebody at work has got to deal with that, whether you outsource it or you have a person that, they are your help desk. So you certainly want to manage it properly. Difficulty providing training. If you've got 5 different platforms, it definitely makes it more difficult to train your users and to get standards set up than if you only had a single platform. So just something to be aware of. And then multiple versions of software that you need to support and that you might need to have licensing for. Different devices have different requirements for software that runs, and all of those have different licensing agreements that you need to be aware of. So definitely some concerns there, and I think the what-if scenarios force us into thinking, well, okay, what if this potential thing happened? And some of you out there may have experienced some of these situations. I've certainly seen just about every one of these in the past. The first one that I'd like to bring up is, what if employee uses their personal laptop for work-related business, you're reimbursing them for it, and then they leave. They start with another firm. You hear that the new firm's been calling on your clients and prospects, and you realize, oh, no, this employee downloaded our entire CRM database, and they're now going to it. That happens. The idea there is, do you have a policy in place that prevents them from doing that? So that if they do it, well, they're breaking the policy. They're doing something they agreed that they wouldn't do. As an extension there, do you have a means to enforce that policy? The thought to remember here is with employees, all things have a beginning and they have an end. As much as you love employees, at some point, for one reason or another, they're going to leave. And when you have proper policies and understandings in place that govern how that's going to be handled, you prevent a lot of legal issues, I'm sure, and a lot of just hurt feelings and hard feelings about what's happened.
Mark, this what-if question brings a good, realistic topic to the table. We have had a number of clients that will call us with this very scenario. Having policies in place is a great thing to do. We certainly would encourage you to do that. In reality, that doesn't always stop someone with the desire to do that. You can have the policy in place. There are measures, and we'll talk about in a little bit. How do you protect that? In reality is this. Most of the time, you won't ever know how they're doing it. Most of the people now, most companies, the way they store their data, it used to be, a lot easier to detect that someone's taking the data. Now, it could be on a thumb drive. It could be on, they could upload it to Google Documents or Google Data easily, and you'd never, ever know it. And usually you find out once it's too late and it's already out there. We'll talk about and just a little bit under the legal concerns, how do you sort of deal with that. But in reality, I used to think, because, it's like probably most of your businesses, your customer list is huge. And, we all have policies and procedures of how do you protect that. But in reality, if someone wants to take it, they're going to take it.
They're going to find a way.
They are.
They are. No matter what technical architecture you have in place for protecting that, if somebody really wants to do it, they're going to do screenshots. So they're going to take the picture out with a camera.
Yeah.
So there are ways around it. But the important thing is you think about it.
So the next what if?
Yeah, what if? And this is something we've seen very frequently. A company gets audited, you get one of these letters from Microsoft that says, hey, we want you to do a self-audit, and then the self-audit leads to Microsoft coming in, and they find, oh no, you got 20 BYOD users, and they don't have copies of Microsoft Office, but they're using Microsoft Office. And oh, by the way, you don't have client licenses for these two applications. You don't have, you're missing 20 clients for Microsoft Server, the client license, and maybe for SQL Server. In addition to your purchasing appropriate licenses, when Microsoft comes in, it's not just a matter of truing up. There may be fines that you're subject to because you agreed to the end user licensing agreement, and then you by doing this, you basically violated the agreement, and they have the right to to implement fines. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a big one. You got to understand licensing.
And this is not something we were going to talk about, but it just made me think about it. When people bring in their own device, and you talk about what the license agreement is. Say, for example, when someone's device, either their phone or a tablet or even maybe a laptop, they download another software that's not company approved, in the sense that it's not something that they have to have. They maybe have done it on their own. And I just happened to see this one time myself. When you click on, do you agree to the terms of the software, you got to make sure you understand what you're doing. I happened to read one where it said they will upload all of your contacts on your phone to their database, and their argument was it made their software run, or the app run smoother on the device.
Right.
But I stopped. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want my client information up there.
Yep.
So I didn't download it. But I can't tell you how many times I know people have done that, not read the agreement.
Right.
And there goes your company information, your customer list. If someone did that, your customer list is now on someone else's server.
Yeah, that's huge. Even for applications that you think might not be doing that. I mean, LinkedIn is a perfect example. If you give LinkedIn the chance to, it will go down into your contacts and pull them all up. And a lot of folks don't realize that that's what's happening. Facebook is another one that will do that. So you really have to keep that in mind.
We got a question, a really good question here. It says, are there any legal issues with remote wiping of an employee's personal phone if a portion of the phone cost is reimbursed? And we've dealt with that some with our employees, well, not with our employees, but with our clients when they have employees who leave and they need to wipe it. What we would encourage you to do is, in your policy, have it very clearly understood that upon their exit of the company, termination, however it may be, that the company has the right to wipe that device. And if they sign off on that day one, when that policy is implemented, generally you don't have any problems with that. We actually were talking about it offline before the webinar started. We have a client who owned his own device, got reimbursed a portion, left employment, and they didn't tell him. They wiped his device. It was not backed up, so he lost pictures and all of his data, all of his personal data. But their policy clearly said, upon termination, we get to wipe it. And most of the time when that's happened, that's not going to be, you're going to be fine. You're going to be protected in that.
Yeah, it's important. And setting those expectations. Okay, let's see. What we have next is what if somebody loses their iPhone? It's got a copy of a roster that's got Social Security numbers, home addresses, maybe client lists. Boy, this just opens you up to so much. Most businesses don't realize how much private information they have on their network. Home addresses, rosters. These are all things that you really need to take steps to protect. Regulatory compliance. If you're under regulation from certain government agencies, they mandate that you take the proper steps. You've got some legal liability to protect this information that is in your care. Certainly, as far as healthcare information, that needs to be protected. And then privacy, basically information. If you let this information get out, you could be subject to, again, fines, or you have to have a pay for credit report for somebody for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that happens.
I'll tell you something else, Mark, and it just again popped up, and we've dealt with this both internally here and about how do we handle usage of cell phones, primarily for us, or laptops, is, well, my kid wants to play a game on my phone, and all of a sudden, accidentally, because most of the kids, were, I guess from 2 and up, are a lot smarter on those devices than maybe the adult is, but they unintentionally sent something out or they downloaded another app or another game, which again allowed all that data to get out, and you've got Social Security numbers or whatever it is that's floating out there. That's something that we even took into consideration with cell phones. We were saying, please don't let your kids play on your phone because of the inadvertent leakage of that information.
It definitely happened. I think that's good policy in place that really states what can and can't be done with that.
Yeah, I mean it's important to make sure you keep up with that stuff.
Yep. Okay, here's a big one. We've definitely seen this one before. Somebody brings their own device into the network. It's got a Trojan on it. It starts generating spam, and all of a sudden your network is on a spam blacklist. And it takes a couple of days of frustrating email. I don't know if anybody's ever gotten on the spam blacklist, but it is a real pain to get off. Definitely one of those things that you need to think. You could also be spreading viruses. You got cost of downtime. You got cost to your business reputation, and cost of morale for the rest of the team that is put in a bad spot because of this.
Yeah, that's a real good what if.
Yep. Okay. The next one is basically the heart of this one is, what if your employee goes out and purchases something that's a consumer grade system, and you've got a business to run, and basically your business is now at risk because of this consumer grade system. It doesn't have a good warranty. You didn't track the warranty. You didn't know when it was renewed, and maybe you've got a key employee now that was depending on a consumer grade system, and if it fails, your employee's out of business, and they've got to deal with it to get it back up and running.
I never really thought about that, but that's a great what if.
Yeah, you really have to understand the turnaround time, the warranty, what data was on the drive. I mean, what if, say there was data on there and the warranty specifies the way you have to send the machine back. Well, how do you get the data off?
Yeah.
Okay, so legal concerns.
Let's look at some of the legal concerns. Obviously, we've identified a few just in the conversation, but security concerns obviously is one of the bigger ones. How secure is your data? What are you doing to secure it? Obviously, if it's a corporate-owned device, you've got your policies about how you secure that. But if it's stuff that's floating out, and say the phone or device gets stolen, and you don't have a password protection on it, obviously that's just free information that's sitting out there. That could come back to your company if you don't have a policy and procedure of how to safeguard. It could come back as a major liability. E-discovery is another. That is where you're involved in a lawsuit and you're responsible for maintaining documents or data for discovery purposes. If you've got now devices that the corporation or the company owns, but also devices that are owned by the employees, that makes your discovery much more costly and expensive, because now you're not only just doing your corporate data, but now you've got to figure out whose device has data on it, and you've got to be able to obtain that data from those devices. So again, just something else to consider. Data stored on personal devices, which we've talked about a little bit. The company data backed up on workers' Google Drive. This, for example, they just want to make sure all their data on their phones backed up, but that also includes the corporate information. Well, now all of your corporate data that's on that employee's device is now hosted somewhere else, and if they leave, that data
you may not have rights to get into that.
You may not, and I'll tell you, Google won't give it to you.
Right.
You can stomp your foot all you want to, but Google is going to be looking to their customer, and you're not the customer. So again, something to think about. There's also a law that came into place in North Carolina. If you do business in North Carolina, called the North Carolina Identity Theft Protection Act. And basically, in a nutshell, what it says is if you are a company doing business in North Carolina and you collect personally identifiable information, so security numbers, driver's license numbers, credit cards, checking account, even addresses, which I don't understand why that's the case, because it's pretty open public information. If you collect any of that data, date of birth included, then you have to safeguard that information as best you can. It's not a full safe. You don't have to guarantee it's safe, but you have to take measures to safeguard that information. What we encourage and what the law says is that you need to have a written policy about how you protect that data, number one, and number two, what do you do if there's a breach? And then three, you got to have some training on your corporate personnel regarding the policy so that it's implemented. And if you do those things, then you are exempt from treble damages if you have stumped your toe with that data getting out. So if without a policy, written policy, and without some education, you automatically fall into treble damages. So, for example, if someone says, you cost me $50,000 in identity theft. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today is hosted by Carolina's IT and our office, Vann Attorneys. And we're going to be talking today about bringing your own device to work. That's a topic that is growing in interest and certainly one that we know many of you are dealing with. And today we're going to be leading, again, under the Identity Theft Protection Act. We just talked about it. You got to just have a written policy. It's easy to do. Some training and understanding, report if there's a breach to the state. And if you have no policy, again, the damages could increase substantially, and that's a treble damage, and it's automatic. And so, many of our clients, for example, in their dealing with corporations or other businesses, they issue business credit, that is credits handled on a monthly basis. They get a lot of that information, Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, bank account references. A lot of companies do that. It's just pretty normal. And so you got to make sure that you protect that information. What about some steps to protect key information? What information is too important to allow that information to get out and to be mitigated? So think about that. What is it in your company that you think, man, I got to make sure I'm protecting that information? What information would be most useful if your competitors got it? And we see that all the time. We had a client where that happened, and the guy walked out, and they never could figure out how he had their client base, but it took about 3 or 4 months, and he had contacted every single one of them. What information would you be embarrassed if it got leaked out about your company? Not many people want to think about that, but probably there's some of that in almost every business, is my guess. And then how would you respond on the witness stand as to how many measures do you take to protect the company's most valuable information? Because I can tell you, the day that it happens, most people are going to look back and go, oh, man, had we only done this. And, the other side will not be kind when they say, well, did you have a policy about that? Yes. What is it? Don't know. When did you learn that policy? Or why did you not follow the policy? It says, do just a little bit of homework will protect you in a lot of ways. So some things to think about there. Also, make sure that your policy is well documented to your employees. We would highly suggest that you have in your company data, your employee policy is that your employees have no expectation of privacy while they're using company data, company equipment and company data. So if they're using a company-owned piece of equipment, no expectation of privacy whatsoever. Emails, again, the company's got to own the email system. Same thing with the devices. And under the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, there is, we won't go through the whole piece of it, but it gives private litigation protection. It used to be just government protection, but now it gives private companies the protection. If there's a person or business that's been injured by, among others, former employees, hackers, spammers, or anybody else, and it prohibits the unauthorized access of a protected computer, and basically that's anything on the company web on the network, with the intent to obtain that information when they commit fraud or damage to the computer or the data. This is one of those things that we were talking about with giving the companies some protection now to say if someone takes data that's not authorized, you can use this statute, but you got to prove some things. But at the same time, if you start saying, hey, look, you've breached the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, to most employees, they're going to go, hold on, let's figure this thing out. There's a whole lot more teeth to it. We don't have time to talk about it, but that just gives you a little bit of an idea. And also make sure that like I said, make sure the policy is really clear to the employees that if they're using company-owned, and again, how would you handle the reimbursement part? I think you go back to it's the data that's really important. It's not the equipment that's really important, but it's the data that they are going to protect that information and not let it leak out. And there's a similar act in North Carolina, the Trade Secrets. It's similar to the federal act, and it says, is it a trade secret? If so, how is it protected? And was it protected both externally and within the organization? For example, just think about, KFC used to talk about their trade secret recipe. Yeah. You obviously want to protect it outside, but if everybody in KFC knew the recipe, well, you probably don't have a trade secret. But there are companies that have, without a doubt, have trade secrets, and they don't want that information to get out. So again, that's another piece of legislation that companies can use to benefit themselves from companies or individuals steal that information.
Right.
What about some guidance, Mark? How would you
kind of summarize it up? We've come up with a few things with as far as guidance for folks that are looking at this. Just to quickly go through it. Ensure you've got compatibility. Ensure your systems are compatible so that they're not bringing in something personal that is not compatible with what you've got at the office. Ensure you've got some standards for software, apps, and how it should be configured, and offer assistance to do that. Ensure that the warranty, the license information is gathered and that it's all tracked so you know what is on your network. That is really important to know what devices are out there. Have a checklist for onboarding and offboarding. I mean, again, folks come and folks go. Need to be sure that, as they're coming on board, you get all these checks. You make sure that their policies are signed, that they've acknowledged what the policy is, and the same thing on the way out, that you remind them of their obligations and make sure that the devices are cleaned up and there's no company data that's going to spill.
Yeah, those are good points.
Encrypt a mobile device. This is very easy now. Most all devices, I know the iPhones as well as the Androids include some encryption. Encryption is one of those things you can take it a little further so that you have centralized management of encryption. Yes, one of the dangers is if you have encryption and then the person forgets their password, what do you do? Well, if it's not centrally managed, there's not a whole lot. So encryption is important as a strategy. Have a way to remotely remove data from a device if you can. If your device allows it, if you have a system in place, that's a great thing to be able to reach out and touch a device, clean all the proprietary data off of it, and then don't worry about everything else. Let them go on their way. And, again, we've said this many times, have policies that cover acceptable use, who owns the data, good stewardship, and what happens when employment ends. Like James said, include a section that gives you the right to monitor, investigate anything that's in use, and make sure that they sign it and they acknowledge it.
And one piece of advice I would encourage is make sure once they sign that you keep that data somewhere secure. You can have an electronic copy is fine, but make sure that you don't have to necessarily keep the original, but you can keep the original and maybe our electronic copy, but make sure that you have it. We have a client that had one of their, actually it was IT people that left, and that piece of document sort of left with them. They couldn't find it. So you got to make sure that you document and just keep up with the documents.
Right. Okay, let's see. Last guidance is be sure this is the last slide, be sure you configure your assets for the least amount of access required by a user. The idea there is if a user doesn't need it, they shouldn't be able to access it. So for instance, you really need to structure your rights on your drive so that data that an employee has no reason to use, they won't even see that it's out there. And that helps in so many ways to kind of regulate what they can see and what they have access to. Then you don't have to worry about it. If they never had access to it, well, great. You don't have to worry about it when they leave. Enforce the standards. Make sure employees are accountable for upholding those standards. And investment. Invest in some type of mobile device management. There's lots of them out there. There's all different types. There's no one type that is, I think, best for all customers. It's basically just a matter of seeing what the client has and seeing what's appropriate in their environment for what the objectives they're trying to accomplish. And then be sure training. Be sure your employees are trained, that they understand how important security is, what the risks are, and what is appropriate usage.
Yeah, those are good guidelines. We've got a point now just for questions. If you have questions, you may submit those either using the GoToWebinar panel, or you can send it to webinar@vannattorneys.com, and we'll be glad to take those. We've had some good questions, and obviously, Mark, we've hit on a topic that has a wide interest level with companies, and as we've identified, it's not going away. Not going away. It's just going to get more complicated, more important, and definitely something folks need to address. We've got a question that has come in. Do you recommend companies use a mobile device management solution like AirWatch to segregate business and personal data to protect the company? I think that is very appropriate. If you can, if the company can make the investment. The problem I have a lot of times with management products is it's great to buy it, but only invest in it if you're going to manage it. If somebody's going to watch it, if
If you understand the true cost of management, is it doesn't end when you purchase the software.
Right.
It takes time to put it in. It takes time to watch it. It takes time for someone to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
So I like systems. I just like systems that are actually getting used rather than just shelfware.
That's right.
Where you buy it and put it on the shelf
Yeah.
and think, oh, well, because we got this, we're protected.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, the one thing that we keep seeing, and I think, Mark's what I've sort of heard from you, is making sure that your employees understand why this is so important. Probably resolves a lot of these issues. And again, you don't say it one time. We all know you got to keep talking about why it's important. And especially with, I mean, some of the people that may be in the workforce for longer periods might understand it. But why can't I use my, you got to make sure they understand, hey guys, we want you to do that. But at the same time, it's a protection that we have to have in place. And the younger, I don't want to throw the younger generation under the bus, but they may not have thought through that a little bit. So it's something else to think about. And again, we've had a lot of companies we've helped with over the years talking about bringing your own device. With your sales staff, one of the things that we have talked with many of our clients is they had a big fear if their sales staff used their own cell phone, because if they left and went to a competitor, that's primarily how the customer base reached out to them. Whereas at least if the company owned the cell phone, they've still got that number. And that's, again, that goes, it fits into this thing, but it makes it a little bit harder. How do you handle that?
It does. One of the things that we've seen now, more and more, is a cell phone system or a company phone system where you assign someone a company number, and then if that person is out of the office, it forwards automatically to their cell phone. So that way you never have to publish those cell phone numbers.
Right.
And you make it a policy. On your business card, you don't put your cell phone number. You put your office extension, your number, and that's how they contact you, because when the employee leaves, you've got control over that extension.
Yeah. So what happens, though, for example, if that, using that analogy, because they call in to reach them, but if the salesperson then calls back to the customer from their cell phone, then doesn't that customer eventually, I guess, have that number, though?
They certainly could.
Okay.
They certainly could. Now, there are ways, like anything technical, there are ways around it. You can mandate that the customer use, or that the sales rep use your phone system. They use their cell phone to call through your phone system back to the client, so the client sees the main company number as the calling number.
That's good. Good point. We had a question about the template for the policy to cover BYOD or red flags or identity theft. Yes, we actually have designed one for companies. If you want to contact us, I don't know, Mark, if y'all have BYOD policies for companies.
Yeah, we certainly do. We basically have a template, and we can customize it for whatever a client might need.
So you can reach out to either one of us, and we'll be glad to help you with that. We certainly would encourage you to have a BYOD policy, but also I want to encourage you to have a policy on how to handle the identity theft information. For example, even if you don't collect that information, your company already has Social Security numbers on your employees, so you still have to safeguard that information and have some way of making sure that you have a policy that protects that and identifies how that information is kept and where it's kept. So again, if you have questions, you can reach out to Mark by going to their website and or phone. And I know Mark, I've dealt with him, like I said, for a number of years. Our company uses their products and services, and they do a great job. So feel free to reach out to Mark and Caroline's IT. And they also have an open house, I think.
Yeah, we sure do. Thanks for reminding me, James. I really appreciate that. Actually, tomorrow afternoon from 3:30 to 6:30, we're having an open house. We're giving tours of our Network Operations Center. We'll have various vendors there. We're going to be doing some presentations on technology, some of the latest technology that's in place to help with, viruses like CryptoLocker and some of those things. So certainly encourage anyone that wants to come on out.
Yeah, and on our website, we list the webinars that we have coming up. We have one on July 8th, and we're going to be talking about protection. How do you protect yourself before lawsuits are filed or started? Again, that's on July 8th. We'd love for you to be active with that if you'd like for that, if that's a topic that you're interested in. We try to say this often. We don't say it every time, but Michael Fernald, who is in our office, is the brains behind making sure all this works, and he is a real pleasure to work with. He has his own company that helps other companies with their websites and information like that. So if you want to reach him, call our office, Vann Attorneys, and ask for Michael Fernald. He's a great guy, very smart young man. joy to work with. So, Mark, thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. I really have enjoyed it. As always, it's a pleasure to work with you, and I've really enjoyed this webinar.
Again, if you all have questions, please feel free to reach out to either Mark or myself. And hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.